This is Meghan Markle's sickest stunt yet. This weekend, she decided to invoke the memory of dead Princess Diana in a deliberate attempt to terrorize...
Again, I have to be careful what I say, but...
Paris. The city glitters, unaware that its lights once witnessed a scream. For most, it is romance. The music of the Seine, the rhythm of flashbulbs, the scent of perfume in the autumn air. But for one man, it is a wound that never healed. For Prince Harry, Paris echoes with loss. Yet on a recent evening, his wife Meghan Markle returned to that city with a smile. Her entrance was deliberate, rehearsed, a queen of her own creation gliding through a corridor of cameras. It was meant to be her rebirth, the Duchess of Reinvention draped in couture shining under the golden lights of Fashion Week. Every angle captured her, every lens adored her, until the moment that changed everything.
This is her in the car videoing herself with her legs up as she went past the tunnel in which Diana Spencer was so tragically killed in Paris.
A short glittering video appeared on social media. It showed a car rolling through Paris, the city lights bleeding into the glass, a pair of legs crossed carelessly in the back seat. For most viewers, it was nothing more than a fragment of glamour, a woman enjoying Paris. But for Harry, the street signs were unmistakable. The car passed the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, the site where Diana, Princess of Wales, took her final breath. To the world, it was an influencer's post.
This is gross and grim and deranged on every level.
To Harry, it was a resurrection of horror. Witnesses said the air around him shifted when he saw the clip. First, he was silent, then still, then furious in a way few had ever seen. For nearly 3 decades, he had carried his mother's memory like a candle sheltered from the wind. And in a few seconds of curated footage, that candle had been used to light another woman's performance.
She thinks that's a win, Brittany? No, we see you, Meghan. We see you, and now the world sees you.
Those close to him say something fractured that night. For Meghan, it was merely coincidence. A casual drive, a passing landmark, a touch of Parisian texture. But to those attuned to symbolism, the coincidence was too precise. The car turned where Diana's had. The frame lingered exactly at the crash site. Even the timestamp matched the hour of the tragedy. It was choreography disguised as chance. Public reaction was immediate. Words like tone-deaf and macabre flooded comment sections. Former royal staffers called it a desecration by ring light. Yet Meghan said nothing. No apology, no explanation. Only the same perfect smile at the next fashion event, as if outrage were just another shade of attention. In her world, silence is never surrender. It is strategy. Behind the designer shades and effortless calm, she watched the fury grow. With every headline, her name returned to the center of conversation. For years, critics had accused her of courting chaos. Now chaos seemed to be her currency. Harry, meanwhile, withdrew. Insiders described the argument that followed in their Paris suite as volcanic. For the first time, he called her actions cruel. He accused her of turning his mother's death into a prop, of using sorrow as spectacle. She replied coolly, "It's just a location, not your property." Those words fell like glass on marble, sharp, final, irretrievable. Hours later, Meghan appeared front row at Balenciaga, a brand still shrouded in scandal. Flashbulbs erupted, gowns shimmered, the spectacle continued. If the tunnel video was provocation, this was defiance. For a woman who had built her public image on empathy and advocacy, pairing with a controversial fashion house was a paradox too loud to ignore. Critics called it the triumph of image over integrity. To her defenders, it was a misunderstanding. To Harry, it was humiliation in high definition. What the cameras did not capture was the quiet aftermath. Harry, standing by a window, watching Paris move below him, each horn and siren scraping the edges of memory. He had spoken before about the night his mother died. The flashing lights, the phone call that froze time, the absence that no therapy could mend. For him, that tunnel is not a place. It is a living ghost. And now that ghost had been filmed for likes. There is an art to psychological control that rarely announces itself. It begins with small acts of indifference, disguised as coincidence. A remark too soft, a boundary crossed with a smile. Psychologists call it normalization, making the unacceptable seem ordinary until resistance appears irrational. In Meghan's world, this often arrives dressed as empowerment. She does not shout. She performs serenity. She does not fight. She narrates. Through narration, she controls perception. Outrage becomes proof of persecution. silence becomes evidence of grace. Either way, the lens belongs to her. Harry sees the pattern now: shock, silence, spotlight. Every scandal is a step in the choreography. Every wound is a window for sympathy, and sympathy becomes strategy. Friends describe him as torn between love and awareness. He once saw Meghan as refuge from the institution that smothered his mother. Now he wonders if he married its mirror, an institution of one where image is the only monarch. When the Paris incident broke, palace aides stayed silent but privately spoke of déjà vu. They had seen this before, headlines that begin with heartbreak and end with a photo shoot. One called it the performance of pain. Another said simply, she knows exactly where to stand when the cameras turn. The tragedy is not villainy, it is repetition. Diana too was hunted by lenses. But where she fled from the flash, Meghan walks toward it. She wears the chase as couture. Show. The art in the days after, the Paris footage spread through media like wildfire. Television pundits debated intent. Body language experts dissected expressions. Every frame became evidence in a public trial of taste and morality. And Meghan remained silent. Until Balenciaga. Her appearance at the show was a statement without words. The brand, once accused of exploiting innocence, now had a Duchess front row. Critics gasped. Supporters rationalized. Yet the pattern persisted. Controversy as spotlight. A British commentator summed it up. Every time her relevance fades, she reaches for something darker. Outrage had become oxygen. Harry's reaction to the Balenciaga show was immediate and unrestrained. Witnesses recalled raised voices, a door slammed, a chair thudding against a wall. He called her obsession with optics a sickness. She called his pain an inconvenience. For a man who once believed love could rescue him from legacy, it was a cruel awakening. Because legacy had followed him into marriage. Outside their hotel, Paris kept shining. Flashbulbs flared like distant stars. Tourists wandered obliviously through streets where grief was repackaged as glamour. In the shadows, cameras waited. For decades, the world has treated the British monarchy as theater. Every gesture is symbolism. Every silence, a script. Harry and Meghan had tried to write their own play, modern, rebellious, self-authored. Somewhere along the way, the script became tragedy. Was the tunnel video carelessness or control through provocation? For Harry, the answer didn't matter. What mattered was that for a moment, he saw his mother die again, through the lens of the woman who promised to heal him. Paris glimmered, indifferent to grief, scandal, and the choreography of fate. But for Harry, nothing shone with indifference that night. Every cobblestone and gas lamp echoed the memory of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. And yet Meghan had returned. She moved as if Paris were a stage built for her performance. Cameras adored her. Designers bowed. The world saw elegance. Harry saw calculation. A resurrection of tragedy turned into spectacle. His mother's memory woven into someone else's narrative, like silk in a designer gown. Like silk in a designer gown. The carriage clip passed the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, the place of tragedy decades ago. To the public, charm. To Harry, a polished dagger. The path mirrored history. The angles were deliberate. The timing precise. Ghosts were resurrected in HD, framed by streetlights, watched by millions. Inside the suite, the aftermath unfolded like a storm contained in crystal. Harry did not shout, curse, or weep. He observed. Every gesture of Meghan became evidence. Then he spoke sharp as glass. You have turned her death into a spectacle. You have made grief into currency. She replied with icy composure. It is only a place, Henry, not a memory you own. The tension could have shattered chandeliers. This was more than a quarrel. It was legacy versus performance. Mourning versus manipulation. Past versus present. Hours later, Meghan appeared at the House of Bellevant's couture show. Front row, poised, radiant. Observers whispered hypocrisy. Critics called it audacity. To her followers, loyalty. To her critics, provocation. To Harry, defiance and couture. This was no coincidence. It was pattern, shock, silence, spotlight. Every controversy a step in choreography invisible to others. Every backlash fuel. Every silence power. At the center, she smiled, measured, unyielding. The next morning, Paris moved on as if nothing had happened. The Seine reflected dawn like molten silver. But inside the suite, another world existed. Strategy, silent battles, slow erosion of love under the weight of spectacle. Harry, who once believed love could shield him from history, realized it could not. Every smile from Meghan was a chess move. He had become a pawn in a game he had not chosen. Outside, the press dissected the carriage clip. Experts debated intent. Social media exploded. Every micro-expression, half-smile, every blink was analyzed. Meghan had become a case study in influence, and she wore it like a crown. For Harry, the weight of reality was heavier than any headline. He remembered the night of his mother's passing, the tunnel, the screams, the flashbulbs. The past had been repackaged as content. The personal became performative. Grief became aesthetic. Palace advisors whispered, optics, containment, narrative control. They spoke of Meghan's brilliance and of the fracture she had caused. For years, Harry had mediated, softened, protected. Now he realized every attempt at peace was absorbed into her machinery of attention. Every apology became a headline she owned. Every silence became another frame in her story. Meghan did not just survive outrage. She thrived on it. She controlled its rhythm. Shock followed by silence. Silence followed by spectacle. Each repetition made her stronger, untouchable, in control. Her visibility was a shield. Her controversy a sword. The world was her stage, and every whisper of critique fed her narrative. Harry, once confident in love's power to balance legacy, now saw the psychological warfare unfold. Grief became aesthetic. Trauma became opportunity. Silence became submission. He saw how much of his own agency had been consumed by performance. In the days that followed, Meghan continued her campaign of control. Charity luncheons, photo ops, public appearances. They rippled through society like an unchecked tide. Each movement, each smile, each gesture of composure reinforced one truth. She commanded the optics, and the optics commanded the world. Meanwhile, Harry withdrew. He observed, survived, carried the weight of legacy in silence. Confrontation yielded headlines she could exploit. Silence became his armor. Even the smallest gestures, hesitation in a handshake, a glance too long, a gown that sparked speculation, became elements of her symphony of influence. As months passed, the rhythm became unmistakable. Outrage, silence, visibility. Shock, denial, spotlight. Subtle mastery. Relentless pressure. Friends noticed the toll on Harry. Fatigue, quiet despair. Trapped between loyalty and awareness. He had sought refuge in love, but found himself caught in manipulation. Yet Meghan remained untouchable. She smiled, charmed, commanded. Every flashbulb, every headline, every whispered debate reinforced her narrative. She was no longer merely a figure in history. She was history itself, rewritten in her own image. Paris remained indifferent. Its streets shimmered. The Seine flowed silently. Ghosts lingered in tunnels and monuments, watching the present unfold like a performance meant to provoke them. Harry understood better than anyone. Legacy had become currency. Grief had become spectacle. Love had become leverage. At the center was a woman wielding power. Not through conquest, not through charisma, but through calculated performance. The Duchess had mastered the art of the lens. Every frame of history bore witness. Days in Paris stretched like molten glass, bending light and time. Yet tension inside the Hotel Ritz remained rigid, almost palpable. Henry moved quietly through the suites, a shadow among shadows, carrying the invisible weight of history. Every corridor, every polished floorboard echoed unspoken battles, the tiny victories and devastating defeats behind closed doors. The Duchess moved with the precision of a master tactician. Every public appearance was performance. Every smile, every gesture, a deliberate signal designed to manipulate perception. To the world, poise, elegance, unshakable confidence. To Henry, control. The kind that crushed spontaneity, distorted truth, and turned grief into spectacle. It was no longer a matter of isolated incidents. It was pattern, a cycle. Shock, silence, spotlight. The first shock had come with the tunnel video. A seemingly trivial carriage ride past the Pont de Lumière, yet meticulously timed and choreographed, like a chess piece moving across a board. Paris slept. The Seine flowed. Lights flickered, indifferent to the pain reignited in one man's heart. To Henry, that moment symbolized betrayal, not just of trust but of legacy. The Duchess had transformed a place of mourning into a stage for her narrative. The silence that followed was weapon in itself. No denial, no clarification, no attempt to soothe outrage. Just calm, measured continuity of her public persona, as if nothing had occurred. And it worked. Outrage metastasized. Public fascination grew. Every critique, every whisper of scandal was absorbed into her performance. Each outrage became fuel. Each criticism, attention, each moment cemented her mastery over the optics of grief, power, and influence. The spotlight arrived in the form of the Balenciaga show, a stage both literal and metaphorical. Critics whispered of the House of Bellevance's past scandals, yet she appeared unshaken, front row, radiant in couture. Every photograph was a declaration. She commanded the narrative and would not relinquish it. Observers debated morality, audacious, hypocritical, but no one denied the effect. The world's attention shifted once again to her. Henry watched from the margins. Every attempt to intervene, to remind the world of context, only fueled her authored story. Silence became his shield, discretion his weapon. Every word he spoke, every gesture was susceptible to reframing and exploitation. The Duchess's brilliance, some whispered, lay in her ability to transform chaos into currency. Every misstep, every whisper of scandal, every backlash was meticulously timed with announcements, projects, or appearances to maximize visibility. The spectacle of grief became a catalyst for influence. Henry, painfully aware, realized he was merely a participant, not a director. In quiet moments, when the press lights dimmed, Henry reflected on the scale of manipulation. This was not ordinary malice. It was strategy, vision, a cold, unyielding artistry, crafted with precision and subtle cruelty, exploiting human emotion. Friends noticed the change in him. Where once there had been indignation, now there was fatigue. Where confrontation had been instinct, now there was careful observation. The Duchess's relentless command of optics had taught him a painful truth. Even love could be weaponized when entwined with power and attention. She did not retreat from controversy, she cultivated it. Each headline, critique, social media firestorm absorbed into a tapestry advancing her prominence. Every public response, measured, polished, rehearsed, reinforced her image, untouchable, unshakable, in control. And every silence from Henry, though intended as strategy, became another layer in her architecture of influence. Within the palace, the story grew mythic. Courtiers whispered of her uncanny ability to turn the world's gaze. Every perceived slight became spectacle. Every personal grievance became fodder for visibility. It was a dance of optics and emotion, executed with military precision and royal elegance. Henry, acutely aware of the human cost, felt each calculated act of visibility carve invisible scars. His mother's legacy, once sacred, was repurposed for relevance. Each public appearance reminded him the past could not protect him. Each flash of cameras illuminated not triumph but loss. The Duchess remained a master of perception. Her gaze met the press with unwavering confidence. Her gestures, measured to the fraction of a second, conveyed composure, masking turbulence behind closed doors. Each attire choice, each gala or charity appearance reinforced the narrative: untouchable, powerful, ever relevant. Even Paris itself seemed to conspire. Its indifferent lights, reflective Seine, avenues, bridges, and historic sites offered the perfect stage. Yet for Henry, the city remained a reminder of absence, grief, and a life repurposed. Friends observed Henry closely. A man caught between loyalty and awareness, love and strategy, past and relentless present. The Duchess mastered narrative control. Henry became an expert in restraint, silence, survival. Every public interaction, edited clip, headline, a battlefield where his voice could do little more than echo back, distorted. Her influence extended beyond spectacle. She built expectation, controversy predictable, silence strategic, attention the ultimate reward. Shock, silence, spotlight. Inexorable, precise, devastating. And at the center, she smiled, aware the world's gaze was hers to command. Yet fissures appeared. Fleeting hesitation, subtle tension, a glance toward Henry betraying faint awareness. Mastery could not erase vulnerability. Henry moved with caution. Engagement carried cost. Words could be weaponized. Silence, carefully deployed, his path to preserve dignity. Past, heavy with loss, became compass. Present, minefield. Every step forward required calculation, patience, balance of visibility, and discretion. The Duchess's campaign continued unabated. Outrage was instrument, criticism fuel. Perception and reality merged. Narrative eclipsed truth, influence eclipsed consequence. Shock, silence, spotlight. Pattern repeated. Rhythm perfected. Duchess of Ravensbridge, master of attention. Henry, caught in current, moved silently, carefully, strategically, aware that grief, memory, and silence had become tools in a game beyond his control. By the next Paris season, observers understood this was no longer isolated incidents. It was a symphony of manipulation, visibility, and control, repetition, precision, elegance, spectacle. At the center, she smiled, radiant, untouchable, while Henry moved like a shadow, haunted, aware, yet preserving silence and dignity. Paris's lights twinkled like distant stars, indifferent to the turmoil within Hôtel Lumière. Tension reached near unbearable pitch. Every gesture, glance, word carried history and intent. For Henry, Paris had transformed from backdrop of glamour into stage of relentless personal trial. Each corner, illuminated boulevard, whispered reminders of loss and manipulation. The Duchess moved like a conductor of a symphony only she could hear. World saw composed, radiant woman. Henry saw calculation, precision, control. No room for spontaneity, no sanctuary for grief. It had become a game of subtle psychological power. A glance held too long. A smile too perfectly timed could unbalance dominate. Each public appearance was a test. A trap where Henry's responses could be read, analyzed, repurposed. Every silence potentially a headline, every word a weapon. The tunnel incident had been only the opening move, a calculated spark igniting this invisible war. Confrontation escalated beyond argument. Grief and ambition collided. Past and present, loyalty and control. Henry, long deferential, protective, restrained, allowed a rare release of voice. Clarity piercing the Duchess's calm. Words, sharp, precise, irrevocable, cruel, attention-seeking, betrayal of everything Diana had stood for. Her response, not denial, not apology. Subtle shift. Slight narrowing of eyes. Small, imperceptible smile whispering, "This is working exactly as intended." From that moment, the game became unrelenting. Every appearance, every interaction, every photograph, a move in a grand orchestrated dance. She weaponized optics, transformed outrage into influence, criticism into currency. Scandal was cultivated, not endured. Visibility extracted from moments meant to harm. Henry became a study in controlled endurance. Movements deliberate, appearances strategic, engagement selective. Shock, silence, spotlight. The cycle continued rhythmically. Unlike the Duchess, whose mastery allowed her to thrive, Henry felt the human toll. His mother's memory, once sacred, now a recurring battlefield, a reference point for scrutiny, wielded as a tool by someone he loved. Observers outside perceived pattern, headlines, flashes, curated moments, elegance, radiance, controversy. Cycle of shock, silence, spotlight. Yet the subtle, profound game, manipulation of grief, orchestration of attention, delicate balance of love and control, remained largely invisible, known only to those living it. Henry's endurance, patience, restraint, a form of quiet resistance. Navigating a landscape engineered for maximum influence, protecting dignity, legacy, truth. Each silence intentional, each step strategic. Survival demanded calculation, resilience required vigilance. The Duchess perfected the rhythm. Every interaction, media appearance, gesture, notes in a symphony of control. Visibility was her currency, influence her domain. Criticism, outrage, backlash, mere instruments playing in harmony with her narrative. In the grand architecture of optics, history, and perception, two figures moved through the same spaces, yet occupied entirely different realities. One commanded attention with calculated precision. The other navigated the consequences of that command, balancing loyalty, grief, and survival in a world that rarely recognized the silent strategies of restraint. The psychological game intensified with each passing day. Shock, silence, spotlight. The rhythm persisted, unbroken, deliberate, relentless. The Duchess of Ravensbridge mastered the optics of influence. Henry, haunted by legacy and guided by restraint, bore the human cost of visibility. Yet the story remained incomplete. For every calculated move, every orchestrated gesture, a question lingered. How long could the cycle endure before cracks in perception, fractures in trust, and the weight of history reshaped the narrative irrevocably? Paris, eternal city of light and shadow, bore silent witness. The night sky shimmered with quiet arrogance, oblivious to the storm raging below. Inside a private suite, the air hung heavy with history, expectation, and tension that had metastasized over years of public scrutiny, private grief, and orchestrated appearances. Henry moved through the space like a man carrying centuries of weight. Each step deliberate, measured, cautious. His eyes, once soft with hope, now bore the fine etchings of experience and exhaustion. Every movement seemed to negotiate with memory itself. The memory of his mother, of a childhood framed by tragedy, of a marriage transformed into a theater of optics and control. Marriage transformed into a theater of optics and control. The Duchess remained luminous, a figure of cultivated perfection. Her smile, her gestures, even the flicker of her eyes were calibrated to command attention. She had become a master of rhythm, shock, silence, spotlight. She moved within that cycle with the ease of someone who knows the cadence of power. Yet away from cameras and curated interviews, there was coldness, detachment, precision. Observers could not help but wonder, brilliance or something darker? The tunnel incident had been only the overture. Every public appearance since, every media interaction, every curated photograph became a note in her symphony of control. Critics called it audacious. Historians might call it manipulative. Insiders recognized strategy. Henry, once shielding his family from scrutiny, now understood the full extent of the psychological architecture around him. The world consumed fragments of their lives, the smiles, the gowns, the carefully chosen words. But they missed the true currency: influence, control, visibility. The Duchess had learned to turn every scandal, every outrage, every whisper into leverage. Criticism became fuel. Backlash became attention. Silence became narrative. At the center of it all, a man who once believed in love and partnership found himself trapped in a performance he could not control. Even the Balenciaga incident, once dismissed as coincidence, revealed itself as part of the rhythm. The brand, still shadowed by controversy, offered a platform for both fashion and provocation. To Henry, it was an affront. To the world, spectacle. To the Duchess, another instrument in her symphony, a moment to assert dominance over perception. Behind curated appearances, arguments flared quietly. Words became weapons. Glances, signals. Each interaction measured. Each reaction noted. Each silence loaded with implication. Henry, restrained by love, legacy, and dignity, negotiated a version of reality he had never chosen. Yet he endured, knowing that every word, every gesture carried consequences beyond public gaze. The cycle continued. Shock, silence, spotlight. With every repetition, the stakes grew higher. Observers could analyze, theorize, debate morality and intent, but only those living within the orbit understood the cost. Every headline, every social media post, every photograph tugged at threads of personal history, legacy, and grief. Each time the Duchess commanded attention, Henry measured, restrained, survived within the architecture of optics she had perfected. Yet moments of reflection persisted. Henry remembered his mother, not as symbol or headline, but as a woman who had loved, suffered, and fought for dignity in a world that often exploited both. That memory anchored him, reminded him that not all influence came at the expense of humanity. Private truths remained impervious to manipulation, untouchable by spectacle. The world speculated. Headlines surged and faded. Social media roared and quieted. Commentary ebbed and flowed. But the true battle remained invisible, subtle, profoundly human. The Duchess commanded optics. Henry navigated reality. Each day was a negotiation between legacy, grief, and visibility, love, ambition, and control. In quiet hours, the truth emerged, not in statements, photographs, or headlines, but in silent recognition of consequence. Actions have weight. Choices carry history. Manipulation leaves marks even brilliance cannot erase. In mirrors, cameras, and city lights, both confronted the ultimate reality. Influence shapes perception, but cannot erase the human cost of legacy, grief, and memory. Paris, once a city of triumph and spectacle, now held a story of quiet reckoning. The tunnel, the flashbulbs, the fashion shows, all were instruments in a narrative stretching beyond cameras, headlines, or social media. At the center, two people, orbiting the same public story, yet inhabiting entirely different private realities. Henry carried history in his silence, a profound, invisible testament to endurance, love, and memory. The Duchess wielded visibility as both shield and weapon, mastering optics and influence. Between them lay a chasm, not distance, but perception, intention, and subtle dynamics of control. In that chasm, the truth remained. The story of legacy and chaos, grief and spectacle, love transformed into performance, is never fully visible to the public. It is lived, endured, understood only by those who inhabit it. And yet, for all its complexity, heartbreak, and brilliance, it serves as a mirror, a reflection of the human capacity to manipulate, endure, and navigate the delicate balance between personal truth and public narrative. The world may judge, comment, speculate endlessly, but the legacy of that night, that city, that cycle will echo far beyond flashbulbs, headlines, or the stage of public perception. It is a story of influence and control, performance and grief, legacy weaponized, humanity tested. As Paris faded into early morning, the story reached neither conclusion nor resolution. Only clarity. Influence, visibility, and power are inseparable from human consequence. Within that truth, the cycle endures. The story continues. The shadow of legacy looms over every step, glance, and calculated smile. For Prince Henry and the Duchess, the narrative is far from over. Each day, each appearance, each interaction, a testament to a battle waged in silence, optics and perception. And for the world, one question lingers. When spectacle becomes strategy, legacy becomes currency, can truth survive? Or does it, like the tunnel itself, become a permanent monument to memory, grief, and control? Perhaps the cruelest twist, in a world of flashbulbs, headlines, and curated appearances, the story that truly matters, the one about love matters, the one about love, grief, and human consequence, is the one we rarely see. The camera clicks, the city sleeps, and somewhere between visibility and reality, the cycle turns again. This is Crown and Controversy, unraveling the royals. One scandal at a time. Don't forget to subscribe.